All right. Thank you all for joining us for this week's Conversations in Agave. I am really excited to be speaking with Misty Kalkofen and Gabe Bonfanti of Maguey. It's a second topic this month that's built around sustainability, but it's a topic that doesn't often get included with sustainability conversations. And that is just how brands and companies work within the communities from where they are producing mezcal. Gabe Bonfanti is the sustainability director for Maguey. As we have joked about before, it's a title that means everything and nothing, because Gabe does everything. He is oftentimes the guy who's taking you out to visit the communities and palenques, in addition to having managed the construction of the Palenque and San Luis del Rio, and all of the other projects that he spearheads. And Misty Kalkofen is the madrina, the godmother of Mezcal, who is the one who leads the educational trips and tours down to Oaxaca, and has obviously spent a lot of time behind the bar prior to her work with Maguey, and is great because she has experience from all of those different angles. And she has been leading the education initiatives here in the United States around sustainability for what seems like for forever, Reticular Interchange Project and other work. And she also has a great book out called Drinking Like Ladies, which really explores the role of women behind the bar and cocktails created, and highly recommend that for everyone. But anyhow, so thank you both for joining us here this evening. I think that was a lot to get out there. This is kind of a big topic that we're going to be going over. So we always have time for Q&A at the end. But if there are questions that you have as we're talking, pop them into the Q&A window, and I will interrupt whatever's, at a good pause point to get that question answered, or I will say, we'll get to that at the end of the program. And also know that we are recording this, and links will be available, and I will be sending out the link toward the end of the week, so you can go back and review anything that you want. So with that said, we'll just, kind of dive into it. And as we dive into it, it's always a good idea to try and define the terms that we're throwing, just so we're kind of clear on what it is we're talking about. And I throughout this, hey guys, let's talk about the social contract. And Gabe has been mulling over exactly what that means, particularly for Maguey. So Gabe, talk to us a little bit about this.
Okay, well, thanks again, Susan, for having us on. We really appreciate it. And we know everybody has lots of things they can do at their time online. So thank you for joining us this evening, wherever you may be. So yeah, it's an interesting term, the social contract. We would normally be framing it pretty similar to how Luis framed it in your conversation of sustainability a couple weeks ago, where there's different pillars of environmental, social, and economic responsibility or sustainability. But I think saying a social contract actually strengthens that a little bit more, because I think in a lot of these communities, what are they used to? They're used to, if there's a natural resource that's valuable elsewhere, people typically would come in, whether it's whatever type of outsider it is, would come in and make some sort of a deal for extracting that resource, and then not ever really think twice about it, and not do a whole lot to benefit the company for being, or the community for being the source of that natural resource or that transformed product. So I think it's one of these really beautiful things about Mezcal, where everybody that's involved is aware that that's inherently required almost. It's almost a requisite of companies to, if you're creating a buy-sell relationship in a community with producers, it doesn't end there. And so the relationship starts with a business relationship, but if there's asks that the producers and or the communities are looking for, then it's the responsibility of the person who's being asked or the company to really try and fulfill that request. And then, just like other verbal contracts in Oaxaca that are still alive and well, such as when Ron Cooper started Del Maguey in 1995 and made verbal agreements with producers to purchase a certain amount of mezcal based on an unknown future demand in the U.S. And fulfilling that verbal contract. That's one way to, well, it's the way to establish trust and not break your word. And the same can be said for these social contracts, where it starts with the community making an ask or the producers making an ask on behalf of the community and the company fulfilling that ask. And then it's evolved from that to, is there anything that we could provide that isn't overbearing, thinking that, oh, this is something that you need because we needed it or something like that, but finding intricate ways to perhaps offer something that might be of benefit without being overbearing.
Which is, for me, it's always an interesting question, particularly with mezcal companies and brands, because sometimes the relationship that they have with the communities where they are, buying product is there are no actual employees. It's like separate entities. And I think sometimes that's not necessarily understood, that, it's not like we're talking about company towns where they're company stores and everybody's an employee and beholden. This is, they're separate entities that are negotiating these different types of needs and fulfillments. And I think in some ways that can make it easier for brands, and in some ways it can make it more difficult around that, because it's a constant negotiation.
Yeah, in the case of a town, it gets really political really fast, because the local municipality or district or agency, they're made aware of the plans of a larger company, and usually a company with government ties, and so it becomes political real fast, and I think that leads to some economic benefits, but as we've seen, it leads in a lot of other cases to agreements that weren't fulfilled based around extraction and pollution, and then other social benefits that we're discussing now. Maybe they have those social benefits, maybe they've built schools, and that's good, and then there's other things on a larger scale. And that's the thing with the mezcal, is it's not at that scale. And these are, although it's booming, if you have to take a couple of producers per village times 1,000, and then you start to get an idea of the scale of it. But the economic benefits are usually directed towards the families themselves, and then an ancillary benefit would be for the community.
Mm-hmm. Well, the base of operations for Del Maguey is Teotitlan del Valle. And that's where it's always referred to as the bodega, but it is, it seems to grow larger every time I've been there. And you use that for basically, it's the main office for Del Maguey in Oaxaca. That was the first town that Del Maguey operated out of. Ron had a house there. So how did that experience develop And what were some of the projects that you worked on, that Del Maguey worked on there initially?
Initially, I mean, speaking for Ron, it would have been, I think he had a project where they had a commercial relationship with the weavers, and they took a risk and bought a bunch of rugs, and which really benefited the community at the time because it was in the 80s. And then additionally, when the mezcal business started, it was, I think we can employ some people here. And you know, when we're talking about these Oaxacan villages, you know, a great many of them lost almost, well, all the firstborn males and many other sons and daughters to immigration because there weren't very many economic opportunities here in Oaxaca. And then, yeah, so I mean, it can get into much further detail than that, but I think there had been an exodus of workers from the communities where, you know, these communities really thrive on their own social contract, which is the being present and putting the work in to weave together the social responsibilities of the village, and in turn being rewarded with land so that you can work the land and stay in the territory. And as the economic opportunities were drying up faster and faster over time, and then, you know, people wanted to get to the US more and more, I think that sort of the fabric of how the political makeup of these villages was probably weakening. And so mezcal has been one thing that has helped to bring jobs back. And in the case of Teotitlán del Valle, it started with a few people, and with more and more orders, Ron could give people more and more consistent work. And so it started with a couple of guys bottling for a week or 2 weeks, and then the work stopped until there was another order, and then they'd have some seasonal work again. And so it was a seasonal work job, which was pretty good considering that most of the income aside from that was coming from weaving, and that was based on tourism and the knowledge from other countries probably that this quality and style of weaving existed. So I think it started there with jobs, like a lot of these stories do, and it expanded to having more and more consistent orders and being able to hire people full time, and not only being able to hire people full time, but to have benefits and insurance and retirement and things like that, you know. So that's been a really, really nice aspect of it, and that everything is still bottled artisanally and at the bodega, and everybody that's on the bottling team is from the village. So it varies, but it's between 12 and 18 people that are always doing that work. And then aside from that, we've been able to, so that established Ron in the community as a business, as someone who had created jobs in a place that just doesn't happen very often. And so he, by being present and having, and being himself, you know, like, people gained a lot of respect for him, and he became Don Ron in the village, and he learned Zapotec, could get by with his Zapotec, and which is pretty fascinating. And so when I came about 5 years ago, you know, he'd already paved the way for, okay, if there's additional projects that we can undertake, we have the advantage of doing this on behalf of Ron and the community and the influential people that work in the bodega, who could help be the go-between between us and other decision makers in the pueblo. I don't know is the rain too loud? Is it okay? Is it bothering you?
Oh, I thought it was somebody, like, I thought it was the church.
Okay. It was the church, but now the rain has drowned out the church. But that's okay. So pretty much right when I started, there was always in the last couple of decades, Telmex, Carlos Slim's Telmex has been the monopoly over the phone service and the internet service in Mexico, and especially in more rural areas where there's less incentive for other companies to compete. And so we were experiencing lots of internet connectivity issues in Tiotitlán, and we talked to other villagers, and they said, yeah, man, we try to talk to Telmex, and they tell us they're sending engineers. They tell us that there's X problem, Y problem, and they never do anything about it because we're out here, we're 40 minutes from town, and they don't see any value in actually providing us any service. And so, like, I went to Telmex a few times, knocked on some doors, and got the same runaround. And so so I found a different internet service provider, and so that was the first time that we went in to talk to the village council and ask permission to essentially put up an internet tower. And they were really wary of it because I think one of the reasons that Telmex wasn't going in is because they wanted to put a cell phone tower in at some point, and the village said no. They didn't want a cell phone tower, and so I think for that reason Telmex had just ignored the village entirely. So they were wary about what kind of tower we were going to put in with the other internet service provider and where we were going to do it. But it turned into a whole negotiation, and this engineer convincing them that it was safe. You know, that the signal, that the over air signal was going to be safe, and they gave us permission to put the tower on a hill that could have a range around pretty much the entire village, because there's a lot of hills in the village, so it has to be by line of sight. And so yeah, so they installed an internet tower, and we paid for the connection for the first 20 families, and then they were obligated to pay their monthly fees after that. But that was how we got the internet service provider to come to town. It really improved the internet, and additionally, it woke up Telmex. And as soon as they realized that there was competition in town, they came and started fixing everything that they wouldn't do beforehand. And they even were offering service to other families because they wouldn't even expand the service in the village. So that was nice. It was like a win-win for everybody. So that was really cool. And they allowed that, you know, those types of meetings because of Del Maguey's presence in the village. Another project that was pretty interesting along the same line is they asked, after it got put in, the local municipality changed, and when the local municipality changed, somebody started causing trouble and saying that we never had permission to put in the tower and things like that, and that there should be some sort of a tax on the company when it wasn't us that did it. But anyway, it caused another fuss because of the change of the political the change of mayor, basically. And so Ron went in and spoke to them, and they asked him, well, you know, there should be a donation of something like a business donation of 5,000 pesos per year, which is like $200 a year. And Ron's like, why don't we donate a water tanker truck, because there's areas of the village that aren't connected to the municipal plumbing. And they were like, that sounds great. And so that became another project where I went to Pueblo with our transportation guru, and he's really good with cars, and we found a really good F-350 truck that just needed a few things to get fixed. And so we found that truck and then tricked it out with the water tanker and the paint job and hoses and everything, and presented it to the municipality. And so they were really grateful about that. So that's one of these things where it was a need that the village had, and Ron proposed a solution, and once again, another win-win. So that was really cool. And so that happens from time to time. And another time there was the women who run Tlamanali. One of the sisters was in charge of a group so these groups change every 4 years because it's their cargo, it's their commitment to the village for a couple of years, and during that time they have to actually produce results, and then when they hand over the project to the next group, that group has something to build upon. And so in this case, they had asked us for all the building materials that they would need to build a temescal in Teotitlán, which we were really excited about. So we donated all those materials, and they did build the space, and then the term of that woman's cargo ended, and the next group that did it hasn't done anything, you know. Like I've tried asking, like, we'd like to help out some more, but maybe it's not at the end of that cycle or something. So they're not pressured to do anything. But so we have there's an empty building that's perfectly set to perhaps be a community temescal, that they could offer temescals in the Teotitlán style, Oaxaca style to visitors and tourists, which would be pretty interesting. But, you know, so that's something they asked us for, and we committed to donating materials, and then we couldn't finish the job because it wasn't our responsibility to do so. And so starting in Teotitlán, like having Teotitlán as a base and learning sort of these social structures, and if we want to get something done, how do you get that? If somebody else wants to get something done, then it's there's a negotiation, an internal negotiation in the company as well. But yeah, along with those projects, there's also been donations to local schools. One of the schools has an auditorium actually, and Steve Olson donated money directly to help out the auditorium and the audio and visual, and so they have this really nice space, and it's like a theater for elementary school kids in a Oaxacan village, which is awesome. And in the same school, we've also donated a digital library. So we're trying to work with them to see if that's working with the type of technology that they have, or if we need to keep upgrading the technology so that they have easier access to access these 50,000 books in Spanish that we donated to them.
Oh. And so, I mean, Teotitlán is an interesting study because it's your base of operations. You have actual employees. Ron lived there and still lives there off and on. So what happens when you are in other communities, and how you kind of are able to run projects there where you don't have the personality of Ron and the trust with community? So how do you go about working on community projects in a different kind of relationship?
So we had, you know, each one is context specific. There's a general structure that we understand with the way that there's districts and municipalities and agencies in these towns and cities, towns and villages around Oaxaca. But then when you get into each specific village, there's definitely going to be local politics involved, and we're involved specifically with families. You know, that we have a 25-year history with specific families. So it's that was one specific challenge. Is we're generally trying to do projects that would help the family, but then you know, there's been a lot of interest in general in, are you helping communities? And we like to say we're helping communities, but then the community implies more than the family. So I'll give two examples. When the joint venture with Pernod Ricard was announced, they were already working with an international NGO, Heifer International, and they were doing good work in Santa Ana del Rio, really community-wide work. And the idea of their project, the concept behind it, was to replicate the opportunities from one village to another. So with a few of, we cherry picked a few of the programs that we thought would work in two communities, in Santa Maria Alboradas and Santo Domingo Alboradas. And in this case, it was going to the families first and presenting them with the project leaders of Heifer, and presenting the project to the families first, because everything we do in these communities is on behalf of the families, and asking their permission if we could then go and visit the local municipality, or what the section that was sort of dedicated to whatever we were asking. So that's how we got to the municipality. Same way that we got to the municipality with Teotitlan, it was through the workers that were working at the bodega. And so we did that, and there were some food security programs where they helped build backyard patios to keep hens and chickens, and really get the reduced costs for natural, healthy, organic eggs. And they realized over time that it ended up being something like 1 peso per egg. So it was a good deal, and it worked out really well. And it wasn't just for the families that were producing mezcal for Del Maguey. In the case of Santo Domingo Alboradas, they installed this the patio and brought the hens for, I think, 8 or 9 different families. So it was more of a community-wide project. By asking permission with the Pueblo, they also conducted sort of not community-wide surveys, but a sample size survey to find out the nutritional health of children under 5 years old in the village, and also the need to have some replanting nursery projects. So they did that in Santa Maria and Santo Domingo, and so that was successful, but it was also dependent on the satisfaction of the families themselves that they were receiving those benefits. And so that worked to some degree, and it was also a good lesson in how to approach the communities, because once they realized that we were doing work in the community, then they started asking for lots of different things that wasn't coming directly from the family. It was now coming from the municipality. And then you have to start making decisions on whether or not that's worthwhile based on the mission that we had. So in both of those villages, the door is still open. That's the wonderful thing is we're coming with different projects, replanting projects, or additional projects that can come in the future, and they're happy with the results. So the nice thing is that we delivered. We didn't try and do too much, but what we did deliver worked. And everybody in the village that was associated with the project was content, so it's really important to have those wins. And then in the case of San Luis del Rio is a different animal completely, because there's lots of competition. It's a huge mezcal producing community. I think when Comercom had their annual meeting there in 2017 or 2018, they announced that village exported more liters than any other village in Mexico, of mezcal. So
that's so crazy. More than Matatlan.
As for export, yeah. I mean, Matatlan produces more in total, for sure, but for export, San Luis was number one. And I mean, a lot of that can be credited to Haciano Cruz Nolasco and his son Marcos and their family and their work they do with Vida. But there's an additional 20 or 25 producers working for other brands that have significant positioning in export markets. So I mean, so San Luis is a different case, and in this case, you know, any type of, we can identify lots of social projects, and they're also not, they don't ask frequently for stuff, but every time Paciano asks for something, you know, we deliver. So that's been a combination of supplies to paint the different schools in the village. That, yeah, sure, no problem, absolutely. Computers for the administration in the schools, sure, absolutely, no problem. And we've also donated a digital library there in San Luis, and we can produce more, deliver more. But yeah, but in this case, you know, it has to come from Paciano. So if Paciano asks us, or if we propose something, it's from us to Paciano, and Paciano talks to the municipality. And if the municipality asks something from us, they ask Paciano, and he asks us. So he's really the go-between there. But you know, and so there's different companies that have offered different things, and it sometimes coincides with the local village fiesta, and we don't always, like the projects that we've done with them don't always coincide with their local, with the annual fiesta, but in one case it did work out. We found the builder of a welcome arch. There's these welcome arches that you see before entering lots of pueblos around Mexico, and Paciano wanted a specific style, and so he sent me to the village that he had seen that style, and I found the builder, and then we worked out a deal so that Paciano paid half and Maguey paid half to build this welcome arch, and it was inaugurated in time for their village fiesta. And now, before their last village fiesta, they put the paintings on of San Luis and the Virgin of Guadalupe, and it's a really nice looking welcome arch. And it really reminds people, there's a plaque commemorating that Ron Cooper and Paciano worked on it together and gave it to the village. So it's one of those things that will be there for a long, long time, and we're really proud of that, you know, joint commitment that we made with Paciano there, because the benefits of working with Paciano in San Luis del Rio have been mutual for both sides. And so, in San Luis, yeah.
No, I was going to say, why is it so essential to work through the producer, you know, the producer families, rather than, you know, negotiating on your own, or, you know, proposing other projects to the larger municipality? Why? What have you learned about, like, how you channel your projects?
Well, in this case, like I said, there's a lot of competition in San Luis, and in these villages, you know, understanding the local politics is not something that we are good at. You know, I think we'll support anything that our producers say, because that's the knowledge that we have. So if we're, like, who knows where the information is coming from? If somebody is giving us information that X company donated this, and why don't you do this now? And we start to get that idea in our head without consulting with the actual family first, then, you know, we can inadvertently cause a little bit of harm, not too much, but a little bit. And so, like, that maintaining that respect and that social contract, which is, we're in this village because of this relationship with this family, so let's make sure that that's how things stay. I think that's really the main reason. Like, one example was a worker who had worked in one of the palenques. One of his cargos, one of his responsibilities was the elementary school, and I'm always talking about the digital library. I was like, you guys want a library? You want a computer? I'll try and get you a computer and a library. And then he disappeared and I didn't see him for a long time. And then he came back, and he's like, "Hey, man, my responsibility with the school is going to end in a week. You think you could get the computer in the library?" I was like, "Well, yeah, I mean, I think so." And so I brought it, and Paciano had heard about it at this point. He's like, "No, man, the guy ghosted on us for 2 years, and then he wanted to fulfill his obligation by working directly with you when he wasn't around for a while. So just, you don't understand that he wasn't there, and the sort of the responsibilities that he wasn't doing at the time. So give us the computer and we'll make sure that it gets into the right school." So that was one
It was
example.
basically like, hey, that guy doesn't get to take credit for it.
Yeah.
He disappeared. He's not the one. But I mean,
Well,
what? No, go ahead. Sorry, Misty.
I think it's important to note, though, it's like any community, right? Like, you only know what you know about your own relationship, and there's so much more that's going on, and really making sure that we're going through the producers, make sure that we're not stepping on any toes, that, you know, they obviously they know exactly what's happening in their community. And so that's a really important part of this is navigating those social aspects when you are creating a program, right? And making sure that you're doing it in the right way for everybody involved in the community.
Wow. And I'm sure that it hasn't been all roses. There have probably been some challenges or some things that didn't work out. How have those been used as, you know, learning examples?
Well, I think one success at the same time depends how it's framed, how Paciano looks at it, is that we did manage to bring a similar internet tower into San Luis del Rio, working with the same engineer. He looked at his modeling, and they have a huge tower on top of a hill near the Oaxaca-Veracruz border, and from there they transmit this over-air internet signal. And he found a dip in the valley in San Luis del Rio. If we went high enough on one of the hills, the signal would get in to hit this tower. And so we came out and we hiked up this hill that had no path, you know, but we're up there where really only burros and these hardcore magueyeros go, who plant the maguey really high on these steep hills. And we found a spot to put the tower, and we had the same sort of agreement. And there's the agreement that, you know, we told Paciano that we'll pay for the installation for the first 20 families. And then after that, it's up to the internet service provider to get more people involved. And so that's what happened. And they thought it was going to be capped at around 15 or 20 families. But then when people caught wind that there was internet in the village, which was sort of the idea in the first place, more and more people signed up, and it wasn't our responsibility to provide the installation fee for them. And so Paciano was like, "Hey, I thought I got to choose who got to sign up for the internet," and he didn't get to choose everybody. And so now there's internet in the village, and for better or worse, it's not going anywhere. And so it's one of those things that progress creates some change, and it's created a lot of new communication opportunities for a lot of people, as well as the information that's there, but as well all the distractions that come with it. So it's a double-edged sword, but you know, I think it's better to have it than not have
it. Del Rio are dealing with the exact same get off your phone or get off your computer as those of us here in the US are.
Yep.
But yep.
If school is closed and you need to get information about stuff, you know, that information is also there. And then it's knowing that those resources are available, I think it's important.
Oh. So
yeah.
Talk about maybe something that didn't work and what you took away
Well, I mean, this starts to get into the area of environmental as well, but it's the same because it's built on persuasion and rhetoric. In one village, we wanted to plant trees. We'd had saplings growing in our nursery for from the end of one rainy season all the way to another year, and the family was telling us that they would take us to the bienes comunales, to the commons group, and ask permission that we could plant trees, and basically I went in there with the son of the producer, and we presented this. We said, hey, we'd like to plant some trees, and wouldn't that be great for the community? And they're like, well, where do you want to plant them? What's the term of use? Like, are these trees for this particular family, or is it for everybody? Do we have to make sure that sheep aren't grazing there? And they started asking all the questions that were really pertinent, and I didn't have answers at the time. We just wanted to plant trees, and so they're like, "Wow, this is too much of an ask. Did you say 500 trees? Like, that sounded like a lot. Near a water source?" Yes. Okay, well, we can't make that decision. It has to go in front of an assembly, and so the communities vote on really important matters with a roll call vote with everybody present, a general assembly. And the producer's like, no way, we're not doing that with you, because there's lots of companies here, and there's lots of politics involved with mezcal, and it's not convincing enough. And so we found a workaround where somebody else had been granted land, and they weren't doing anything with it, and they'd actually wanted to plant trees, and they're like, it's right where you wanted to plant them in the first place. I'm like, okay. So we got permission from the person who had permission, and we were able to plant the trees there. But it's a lesson in doing things, if you want to go through the proper channels and having everything organized. And really, in that case, like in a lot of these cases, everybody wants to know what's the benefit for the person proposing this, because this attitude for so long has been like, if there's a foreigner here, and foreigners include anybody outside of the village, essentially, like people around Oaxaca are less foreign, but then somebody from another state is a foreigner. Somebody from Mexico City is definitely a foreigner, and we are absolutely foreigners. So if a foreigner is coming in here, what is their ulterior motive, And I think what we're trying to get across, and I think it's becoming more and more evident, is our motive is that things continue to improve here. If there's local needs, and there's this growing demand for mezcal globally, then it's also our responsibility to help and to convince you that we don't have an ulterior motive. Like the actual motive is just to continue to deliver benefits that are useful for you locally, that are, it's a possibility for us to help with. So that's been a lesson, and getting to the point where that's clear. And I think in the meetings that we have with these local municipalities, it's becoming clear, and that's nice.
Yeah. Well, and it was a point, as that Luis with Amaras Amores, was really talking about too. It's like, you have to go back. It's like you develop a relationship over a long period of time. And it can take several years to get to the point where you can really work with a community or with producers on like projects, because they need to know that you are going to come back.
And in that vein, it's like Ron has 25 years of experience and a very close relationship with these producers, and still in that moment there's that need to make sure that there's follow through, right? Mm-hmm. And that's so important. It's all about making sure that one of the first things that Ron said to me when I took my job was like, Misty, the most important thing in your job is to be a person of your word. Don't ever say that you're going to do something that you can't follow through on. And it was one of his first words of advice to me. And I've never forgotten that, which is good. Because it plays out in very large scale in the projects that Gabe is doing, but even on the small side of things, like, can you come for this birthday party? You don't say yes unless you're really sure that you're going to be there, you know?
Right.
So it's super important that, you know, it's super important to start your relationship, but it continues to be important all the way through your relationship.
Wow. And I mean, so Gabe, what do you know, you've got the internet project happened in Teotihuacan and San Luis. You've got the digital library that has a solid foundation. And there's a solar project that happened.
Yeah. So I think, you know, this falls under whether it's environmental or social, but it really, we installed solar panels in San Luis del Rio before there was electricity in the palenque, in the producing facility, for both Marcos and his father. So that was a big boost, you know, to all the workers there, to have electricity and to have illumination. You know, it's like one of these things that we take for granted sometimes, but they're working around the clock because you have to distill for 18 hours a day, you know, or sometimes nonstop. And so that was really nice, and people thanked us, and that in San Luis, and then in Santo Domingo Alvarado, same thing. They didn't where they've always had their palenque, and they built a new palenque above the older one. They're doing all their work with headlamps and by candlelight, you know, and it's really limiting. And so just one solar panel, one 120 watt solar panel was enough for 3 60-watt light bulbs, and that gave them enough light to work until 5 in the morning, which is when they had to work until. So that was really cool. And so every time, you know, the family in Santo Domingo is extremely gracious and really wonderful, but they're like, thank you so much for the electricity, which is cool. It really meant a lot. And so that was, you know, it was us proposing something to the partners, and the partners absolutely agreeing with it, Ron absolutely agreeing with it, and let's go for it, you know. And and so and also in Santo Domingo they now have internet as well, because the same company installed a tower, but we helped with the installation for the internet in their homes. And so that's been really good. So I guess as we motor through, there's also been some fundraisers that we've done. We did a fundraiser in San Baltazar Chichicapam with a boy named Angel who had hearing issues, and this was one of those beautiful things. You know, I think it's one of these things, the greater community of consumers and bartenders and restaurant owners, they want to help as well, you know, and they want to know about projects that they can help with. And so with Angel, his parents, they organized a meeting between us and the producers because they're cousins of the producers, and he had hearing issues, and the doctor said that without a particular type of hearing aid, he really had no chance of hearing the rest of his life. And so we did a fundraiser, and we built it, and then Misty took it over and really raised the money for that project. And then we raised enough money, and we gave we got the hearing aids for Angel, and that family's always been really appreciative. So that was nice. And then another boy in San Luis del Rio, his father works in the palenques and also has his agave fields. His boy has multiple sclerosis and needed different surgeries to at least help his range of motion, and then with the hope that someday maybe he could get out of his wheelchair. And so we raised $10,000 for that, and it paid so far for his first operation and for all of his therapy the last year and a half since he's been going to therapy, and it'll be enough for continuing therapy to relieve his parents of some of that economic pressure in all of his therapies. And if there's additional surgeries that are necessary, I think that those can still be covered with the program that he's in. You know, so I think the fundraisers are a really important aspect, as well as before we move on to the next phase of the fundraisers, I think if Misty can talk more about the loyalty programs and how those are essentially social projects for the village too, bringing people to the village.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, like, that's a huge part of my job. Well, in old Earth, it was a huge part of my job. And also, like, it's super gratifying. It's my favorite thing to do, to be able to have these opportunities for people to have firsthand experiences with our producers and in the communities. But there's definitely, you know, there's the side of it where they definitely want to take a part of Oaxaca back with them. So in the communities that we're in, whether it's Teotihuacan and the way that they support the artisans there and the artisans within the other communities, you know, even in Santa Maria Alvaradas, you know, the women in the family all do this amazing crochet work. And so there's opportunities to support the local artists. But a huge part of it is the fact that people are going and having this firsthand experience and really taking back a love of the place with them, and in addition to the love of mezcal. And so when we have these opportunities when we're starting fundraisers like for Angel and Elias, they feel connected to it, you know, and that's a really important part of us being able to get the word out and help to raise those funds for those campaigns, which is really amazing. And so it's really cool to have this little kind of army, you know, of people who feel connected to the pueblos, who can help us in those moments and reach our goals. It's been kind of amazing.
Yeah. I you know, something that I learned in traveling to the pueblos, you know, it's like I always was prepared to buy mezcal, of course, you know, as your tasting product with the makers and everything like that. But I initially did not know to come prepared to buy crafts as well from usually the wives. And I got taken to task in a major way with one of my good Oaxacan friends after we went someplace, and, you know, the mezcal was beautiful. I bought, you know, some mezcal, and the wife brought out these gorgeous embroidered shirts. And I was just like, oh, okay, I can't buy them. And it was just like the cold that descended, you know, upon this. And, you know, it was a look. Yeah, I know. I mean, it was just like, oh my God, I am that asshole. And now knowing better, you know, but I just never travel with money on me. I don't travel with money on me in the US, and I don't travel with money on me in Mexico. And it was a learning experience. Like, okay, bring enough money just in case, like, you know, somebody pulls a craft out and you need to buy and support that, the family industry. But you have kind of a big project that's launching right now, if I recall the conversation around this, with the Zapotec talking dictionary.
Yeah, so still that same theme of fundraising and how the mezcal community can support some of these projects. In some cases, like the two kids with health issues, those are more direct donations that we give directly to the family. But I think it's a really cool initiative that ever since I came along, you know, that Ron and Steve and Michael, the partners, always wanted to have limited edition limited edition bottlings that would essentially be released to raise money specifically for specific charity projects. And one of those is still in the works 5 years later, and it will come out, and it will be really beautiful. But last year, they finally released this expression from Faustino in Chichicapa called Boca del Cerro, and they priced it higher than Chichicapa would normally be priced, because 33% of the proceeds for the sale of all 800 liters were going specifically to a social project, right? And in this case, the social project is a platform called the Talking Dictionary that comes from a university, a collaboration between universities in the US, but it comes from Swarthmore College, who they're really big on, and their linguistics department is globally renowned. And so they've had this initiative already launched in Oaxaca, with Central Valley Zapotec. And so one of the professors who's helped with the Talking Dictionary program, she's a friend of mine, and so we arranged for the proceeds to go directly to an NGO in San Diego, the International Community Foundation, that are still accepting donations for these projects, for Del Maguey's social projects on the ground. And we're working with a local foundation on the ground, the Fundación Comunitaria Oaxaca, so the Oaxacan Community Foundation. And with the proceeds, we're going to be able to bring linguistics students from the US, and also I want to have at least one linguistic student from Mexico. And we have permission from the local municipality in Chichicapa. And it was going to be happening right now, but it got canceled. So it's been postponed until next year, but it's definitely happening. And so we have, and we've written about this on the sustainability blog. It's called the Single Village Bulletin. But we raised $23,000. There's some administrative fees from the organizations themselves, because all of this is tax deductible. And then this platform is essentially run and donated by the college, by the university system. And then the students come in, and with local volunteers, they'll sit with them for 4 weeks and start to upload audio and video and their interpretation of how the Zapotec in Chichicapa is spelled, right? And then this is then populated with English and Spanish equivalents. And all of a sudden now there's this sort of interactive live platform that can continue to be populated with more terms and words and audio and visual, and it belongs to the community. I think that's the main thing. And so this is going to be the culmination of a lot of these projects, which is the convincing that we're here and we're donating this time and this energy and these resources strictly for you guys, and we can educate you on the use of certain aspects of the technology, but in the end it belongs to you. So if you believe in this as a way of seeing your language written, which doesn't happen, these are all oral languages, but in the case that they're at risk of not being spoken in a couple of generations because there's so much Spanish over regular mediums being spoken that kids aren't speaking as much Zapotec. In Chichicapa, a lot of children do, and then a lot of children don't. And so we're watching it happen. We're watching it in real time, where the next generation isn't speaking as much Zapotec as the former. So it's a good time to have a project like this. And it's one of those things where they didn't ask for it. We're presenting it, and the local municipality is accepting of it. And then we have to have local empowered project leaders who really believe in it and can get more done. And we'll have funding to fund it for at least a year. And then if there's additional donations to that program, then it can continue, or we can have another limited edition bottling sale and have the same type of program in a different village, because the Zapotec is different from village to village. So it's a really cool opportunity with combining everything. The team on the ground that we have who care so much, the greater Mezcal community, trying to bring stuff back and something that would have a lasting benefit, you know. So it's hasn't happened yet, and there are some nice examples of talking dictionaries that do work, and we will have a talk with the authors of these community dictionaries and the founders of this talking dictionary program in Oaxaca. We'll have a talk with them on July 7th.
Oh, okay.
Next Tuesday. So we'll promote that a little bit. Maybe have more than two participants who were signed up last week, but then the earthquake struck, so we had to reschedule.
Right. the minor thing of the earthquake. And then you have a couple of other projects in the works too. That's
I think it's funny when we started presenting when the pandemic started and stuff, and one of the moderators was like, well, sounds like everything you do is a collaboration. It's like, yeah, there's lots of collaborations, but we're collaborating with lots of different entities. So in one case, this really interesting NGO, the founder of an NGO in southern Oaxaca, he's from the US, and the NGO is called Growers First, and they really focus on agricultural communities, mostly coffee fincas, like the coffee growing communities in Oaxaca and Chiapas and Honduras. But yeah, they came up, and I took them to San Luis del Rio, told them our story, and he was really interested in it. He's like, well, we have programs in Oaxaca, and maybe we can help you out. And so this year they were already planning on bringing doctors, a series of doctors down, and they're called rural medical brigades, and they bring in a team of specialists. Essentially, they're not just general practitioners. They bring in dentists and doctors and surgeons for a couple of days in communities of around 500 people, and they treat as many people as they can in 2 days. And this year they said, we'll do that in a community of your choice. If you have a community of around that size, and we'll dedicate an extra day coming up from the coast, and then they can, or an extra couple of days, so that they can get settled and do that in a village in Oaxaca. So it got postponed again. Like we thought we were going to have it in September, but this will be another fundraising opportunity. We're not going to be asking for too much, but like the benefits from it are going to be amazing. You know, like to be able to treat a couple of hundred people in 2 days for a few $1,000s is fascinating. And this is one of these things, like if it goes well, maybe that's an opportunity to A, bring it to other communities that we work in, or B, collaborate with other brands to see if it's something that they would also like to raise money for and to have done. But, it's one of those things that we have to do a pilot site type project in one of our villages, see how it works, see what the time constraints are for these specialists and their relationship with that NGO. But really excited about that, because that's something that, that's an easy presentation to the village. Like, hey, can we bring in
doctors? Yeah. That's an interesting program, because you see things like that happening in the United States, in areas in the Appalachia, in Kentucky, and where there have been so many closures of local medical facilities, that there are literally these brigades of doctors, and nurses and Winnebagos that go around to communities. And it's, having to remember that it's not just rural Oaxaca, but it's a real concern of people not having adequate access to healthcare. And then you have one other project too that you're working on, or
Yeah, there's so yeah, that one.
Yeah. I'm like, the exciting one, Gabe.
Well, yeah, you like talking about stuff that hasn't happened yet, and it could happen. And so I guess what could happen here is it's a really cool story, and we're sort of seeing how it will go, but we're hoping to collaborate with other mezcal brands and build a hospital at the children's at the pediatric cancer center here in Oaxaca.
That wasn't even what I was going to ask you about, but that's
I
amazing.
think he was talking about bees, but this project's amazing, so I'm super excited he's talking about it.
Like, this is all.
Go on.
Yeah.
But anyway, but so like the idea behind that is working with other brands to raise money to essentially collaborate and build this shelter. And so we have a local architect. We have other local businesses who are going to donate goods. We have a couple of other brands that are already interested, and then, but we don't have the final tally of what this is, the proposed cost. And so until I have that, then I can't go and ask other brands if they're interested, but it's, and especially now, like, to see what the economic situation will be like coming out of this. But it's something that we started, it's been sort of in the works for about a year, and it'd be really cool to make it happen. But again, you know, it's not easy working with the local hospital administration and all the parties involved. So getting this thing moving and off the ground will be an interesting challenge, and hopefully we can report that in short time that it's happening. But sorry, yeah, I forgot that there was one other project. So the other.
Before you move on, Gabe, I just want to say, because I know there are a couple people that are on with us that work for other mezcal brands. So if you are interested,
please follow up and like have the conversation.
You can let me know.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Now I feel like, you know, so to transition over to honeybees is like, usually I get really excited about it, but the idea of a hospital wing is pretty awesome.
No, the bees has been in the mix for way too long, and we do have some traction there. But we work with a forestry professor who's also a beekeeping expert, and then her partner is in charge of our agave and tree sapling nursery in Teotitlan del Valle, and right behind the nursery we have 3 beehives, and the honey from one of the beehives is going towards our loyalty program, which is going to be really nice, so people can get this local honey with local flowers, and some of those local flowers are from agave flowers, which is fascinating. And then we're also going to be training Luis Carlos Jr. in Santa Catarina Minas how to have it. We had the spot already set. All we had to do, we had one more week, and we could have delivered this beehive back in March, but we ran out of time. So when we can safely enter the villages again, we'll bring a beehive to Santa Catarina Minas, and then hopefully this year we can have another beehive in another community, whether it's one of the 2 Alboradas or Chichicapa. And so we'll work with the apiculturist and train them how to take care of the bees, and that will, at the very least, provide a really healthy sweetener alternative for the family, which is so much better than the sugars that are normally available. And then if there's a little bit extra, who knows, over time, maybe it's something that they could sell for a little extra money or income. But, you know, with the size of the beehives to start, it'll mostly be as a dietary supplement to what they use in the kitchen. But a really a really cool one. And, you know, at the same time, it's also bringing new pollinators to the area, and in areas where agaves are growing, then they're also going to be agave pollinators. So, you know, Mexico isn't universally experiencing the same rapid population decreases in bee populations as the US, but it's happening. And so the more bees that can be safely introduced, you know, because they have to be introduced in away from homes and far enough away so they're not bothering humans. But if they're far enough away and not bothering humans, then it's a really cool project to be a part of, and we can share some of that with visitors, and we can share it with the producers. So it's happening in its slow, organic fashion, but it's gonna be really more fairly established at the end of this year than it was at the end of last year.
That's, I mean, I think, you know, like having done some community development work myself, it is, to have successful programs, it takes a long time. And as simple and straightforward as something might appear, it really, there's so much involved. And then when you're operating in a foreign country with language differences, with a very established community, it just is, it's a very not easy project. And I know from previous conversations with you, Gabe, that you are loath to talk about anything that isn't complete, that isn't complete and isn't working. And I just think it's important sometimes that we're able to talk about those things that haven't worked, so that other people don't repeat the same mistakes and lose that importance and time of it all. But I want to make sure that we give an opportunity for folks out in the audience to ask some questions about that they might have with not only the specific projects that you've talked about, but any other questions about developing these type of community programs. So for anyone, you can go ahead and go into the Q&A box. One of my questions for you was about where you see opportunities for brand collaboration, and you kind of answered that question with this big news about the hospital and opportunities there. But, you know, it's, do you think that brands could, you know, be able to work together on some of these projects? And
yeah, so one that we didn't talk about too much, and you know, it's the nice thing, there'd be lots of secondary benefits to this, but anybody who's sort of loyal to any brand, they just have to care about Oaxaca. If they have second generation or used phones, tablets, computers, and in the past, you know, something that, you know, we think it's going to happen always, that we're going to have this like army of people coming for their mezcal pilgrimages all the time to Oaxaca, and then all of a sudden it's stopped. But it will pick up again, and when it picks up again, I would like to say that we want to put these sort of technologies into local libraries, just donations to the local libraries, and if they have enough storage capacity, the stuff that's donated, to also be able to put this digital library. But I finally figured out how to put like the 50,000 books on a $10 USB drive, and you plug this USB drive directly into any Windows computer, and it works. And so that's really the best thing. And so, you know, talking to other brands, that's really the question, is if their brand loyalists would like to donate any of this technology, and then they can bring it, and we could talk to the local libraries, local communities. We will provide this library always to that, and with the specific instructions how to access it and how to download any of these books onto their phones, really, so that like the tablets aren't necessarily the most important aspect of this, but it's more about like computers and phones. So if there's a way to donate computers and phones, and other brands want to participate in this, then, you know, we could be in a lot more villages than previously.
Mm-hmm. And so a couple of questions, if there are any links to how to donate, if Misty, if you, or Gabe, if you have any links you want to share with everybody, or other ways in which people might be able to donate. And then also, what sort of volunteer opportunities might there be for folks? Oh
yeah, so that's been another really cool project that I guess we didn't mention yet. Thank you, Ron. We've had 2 interns come down and work with Marcos in San Luis del Rio. And these guys were interested in mezcal production, how to make mezcal, but at the same time, you know, along with Ron and then me, they were the only 2 Americans who've spent the night overnight at the house in San Luis del Rio. And so, you know, the family really embraces anybody that's that does this and that shows interest in what they're doing and spends time with them. And then Marcos additionally really appreciates it because he spent 5 years in the US and he learned good English, and he always wants to continue to speak English. And so these guys come down, they want to learn about mezcal production, and they want to improve their Spanish. And at the same time, they get to work with Marcos, and he wants to learn English. And it's a wonderful interchange that is unforgettable for everybody involved. And it's really quite special. So we've had one volunteer named Griffin Marcos and another one, Nick Predite, and I think probably the ideal time would be to come down and in that sort of situation, if it's specifically San Luis del Rio, working on Vita production, we can help set people up. It's an unpaid volunteer opportunity, but you get paid in this knowledge and food and shelter, lodging, and an unforgettable experience. And about a month is a good amount of time for that. You know, additionally, any other volunteer opportunity from somebody who's already bilingual or is pretty bilingual would probably be more than welcome. You know, you could send us information. We can get you links to some of the stuff that you're asking for, Susan, and the digital library. I'll write a blog about that so that it's current and up to date, and that information can then be sort of published pretty soon along all channels. But the same can be said for these volunteer opportunities. There were some blog articles written about it, but you can contact Misty directly or me directly, and then we can go from there.
Well, it is hard work, everybody. That is, you will sleep soundly.
So I put up in the Q&A on Chris's question a link to the GoFundMe for Elias in San Luis del Rio. We're still taking funds for that. And then also the link for the Talking Dictionary. So I'm not sure if everybody can see that, so I might put them in the chat as well.
Yeah, I would say put them in the chat, and then I will be sure to copy them and send them out along with the recording or the link to the recording, so folks have that. It is. Any other questions for people? This has got to be. It's captive audience kind of thing. It's, I think that was part of it. I mean, I think, you know, a question that I also have is what kind of advice you can give to other brands that might be looking to develop more of these social programs, and kind of how they can proceed on it.
Well, um, you know, like was mentioned in a previous talk with you, these things, these come out of a company's bottom line, unless you can find ways to collaborate with local NGOs or international NGOs or something like that. But then it's, you know, you become a go-between for them and their sort of their agendas as well. So people who want to be involved with this, it's, you know, it's an additional investment, and it has to be sort of factored into your operating costs. It's an operating cost, I think. Not everybody would look at it the same way, but at the end of the day, and you can start small. You know, there's a lot of this stuff that even if you're using your reach as a brand, you can ask for things, but you have to have an organized ask, and then you have to deliver, you know? And so I think the main thing, and a lot of people probably realize this, but the main thing is start small and get lots of small wins. Don't try and clean up the Red Ant River on day one.
Oh God, is there such a thing?
The river in San Luis del Rio.
Oh, right. Yes.
Rio Hormiga Colorada.
But all right, what other questions do we have for folks? I mean, okay, Gabe, have you been learning Zapotec?
Well, it's funny because yeah, I in Tiotitlan, they teach me some phrases. In Santa Maria, they've taught me phrases. In San Luis, they've taught me a couple phrases. In Chichicapa, a couple, and then you write them all down, and then yeah, you're learning how to say the same thing 5 different ways. It's pretty complicated, but I also realized, you know, my way of learning, I'm a pretty visual learner. So for example, I've been learning these indigenous songs in Lakota, and when I find the lyrics online, then I can really practice, and then I see the translation side by side, and it's so helpful. I mean, that's just how I learn a language. And so I've looked at these talking dictionaries, and it's really wonderful to get on there and see it in English and Spanish and Zapotec, and then you can even compare it to a different village and see like what that word looked like compared to this in one village compared to another. So it's cool for me to see. The talking dictionary is not for us. You know? It's actually kind of interesting to see how that can help us learn some more words. But yeah, to really learn it, I think I'd have to, you pick one village and you get a teacher, and then you learn from that village, and then you apply what you learn in that village to the others, and you can find ways to communicate. But when you're trying to collect like the dialects, it's pretty complicated.
So it's up there with trying to understand agave varieties and all the different names, right?
But it's amazing though when you're doing that and you're learning like these snippets in each of the villages, because the same thing, I've been doing kind of the same thing with my groups, right? And so you're learning it and it sounds so different to you, and yet even though there's all these different dialects, they understand one another within the communities, right? Like, so for me, I'm like, how they say thank you in Chichicapa versus how they say thank you in Santa Maria Alvaradas sounds like 2 completely different languages, and yet there's this connecting thread for them. And so how amazing would it be to get to that point that that all of a sudden you were able to connect this, you know, but it's challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine. I don't have, oh, sorry, Gabe. I'm going to copy that and put that in response to everybody in terms of volunteer opportunities. So you can shoot Gabe an email at that email address.
Oh, I just sent it to you.
Yeah. I'm like, I know your email address, but thank you. But I guess since we don't really have any more questions at this time, we can sign off. But I greatly appreciate everybody's time, and Misty and Gabe, your time particularly in talking about this subject, which just it doesn't get enough time or enough of a spotlight when we talk about these things. And the projects can seem so small, and yet at the same time, they are so important. And especially if we can continue to grow and grow and grow them. But
it's part of being a sustainable brand. We talk about sustainability and it gets a very narrow focus, but the truth is that word encompasses a lot of different things and disciplines, if you will. So it's important.
Yep. Oh, and Christoph, yes, I will send you the contact information for Misty as well. So actually I'm going to put that in here right now. And hopefully, excuse me for leaning in like this. I lost my internet connection in my usual office, so I had to do the big move, and I don't have my keyboard. I'm so ill prepared. But anyhow, so Misty and Gabe's information is in there for folks. It's in the chat box, and I just greatly appreciate again the time. And we are going to be taking a little bit of a break in July as we are reworking things going forward and putting together another schedule for conversations in Agave. We will probably have one or two toward the end of the month in July, but somebody needs a vacation. So anyhow, thank you all. I will get the link out to folks at the end of the week. And then we'll be posting the links to all of the June talks on the website by Friday. So anyhow, thank you. And
thank you, Jen.
Yep, we will be talking. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Misty. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, Gabe. Thank you, everybody.